Welcome to the Women in Leadership Body, Soul, Mind, and Business podcast. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Heather. And together we are working to connect women in leadership and business to build relationships, empowering each other, improving the health and wellness of our community, body, soul, and mind, sharing the heart and soul of who we are and what we do.
Today's guest was one of our very first guests. She's been with us a few times. The amazing number specialist. She loves numbers way more than I do. And she has turned it into her passion project and her business from Safe Haven Accounting, the beautiful and ever inspiring Chelsey K Gonzales. It's lovely to have you again.
Thank you for having me again. I love getting to be with both of you and getting to know you each time we meet.
So take a couple of minutes, let people know a little bit about your business, where you are and what you do.
So, okay. I started Safe Haven Accounting when I was furloughed from my full-time job because of COVID. I've had another business as well. I was a health coach for many years, full-time before going back to the working world. And then I was pregnant, and then I got furloughed. So things have turned a different corner. I never expected to be a full-time bookkeeper, but it really is my passion, and I found that when I went back to my job at the YMCA. So I started this in 2020 and then didn't really launch until this last fall. And I'm loving it. I loved getting to help local business owners, particularly women, because I've also been a women business owner. And in my previous business, the reason I actually went back to a regular job was because of financial mismanagement, which is the number one reason most small businesses close. And I wouldn't say we were in dire straits, but we weren't stable. And I didn't know my numbers. I didn't know where we were at week to week or month to month. I would do my taxes or my books, everything once a year, and it was this huge stress. And so that's why I went back to have a regular job, was to have more stability in my income, but prior to having a child. So anyways, now launching this business, I had a little bit of trepidation, but it has been completely different than my previous business. I know exactly where I'm at every day, every week of my finances. I have projections, I budget, I know exactly what's going on, and I know what I need to do to continue my growth and to set goals. And part of that comes from my coaching practice, was a lot of goal setting. But so I've taken everything I learned in my coaching business and applied it to my bookkeeping business. And so I really just love all those hard lessons that I learned and just taking them into this business. And then I share a lot of my horrible hard lesson stories with my clients, because we don't know what we don't know when we're new in business until you find out you're supposed to be quarterly payments to the federal IRS. I didn't know that for a long time. So there's a lot of things you just don't know. You aren't taught as a self-employed person unless you go to business school. So
I think that's a perfect segue to what we wanted to talk about today. Right? So we've talked a little bit about like financial trauma and going into business as a woman. We have a lot of hats going on, lots of things going on. So
outsourcing some of the things that might be hard for you or take up way more time and energy than they should.
Right.
And one of those can be bookkeeping or accounting or HR. And we have different people for different things in our network. But what do you do when you go to hire somebody in order to make sure that you're covered? Like, they're not going to
do they know their stuff? Like, if I don't know anything about bookkeeping, I mean, it's different when you're going in and you have a knowledge, or like it should look like this and these kind of things, so you can kind of like, okay, oh cool, you have that piece, sweet, awesome, oh, you can next level me here. But if you don't even have that base knowledge and your expertise is over here, and this is Greek. Like I'm
Right.
reading ancient Greek. How do I pick somebody? Like how do I know that I'm okay?
That's such an important thing. And before I tell you kind of what I would do if I was hiring a bookkeeper, outsourcing is a really interesting thing that I just want to mention. I've completely changed how I think about outsourcing. And what I mean by that is when I was coaching, I met with an accountant bookkeeper, but I never hired her, and I should have. I mean, truly, it would have saved me a lot of grief, but also I could make more revenue if I wasn't spending time over here worrying or doing my books. And I say worrying or doing because most of me was just worrying about it, not really doing much because I didn't know what to do. So outsourcing is such an important thing. And what I like to do for someone, if finances are really an issue with hiring a bookkeeper, is first talk about how much time would this save you and what can you do with that time saved. Because if you're spending 2 hours a week on your books, that's 2 hours you can spend making more money in your business and outsourcing that. And when you look at the financial impact, usually you're saving a lot of money because you're able to make more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So outsourcing is a big thing that I totally have had a mind shift on since understanding it better. And mostly thinking about ramping up my business, I'm going to have to hire bookkeepers at some point. And so I really had to figure out that process in my own head because it's a little scary for me to think about outsourcing, and even now as a bookkeeper. So to answer your question though about hiring when you don't know the subject matter is you have to do your due diligence. That's what I would do because I've hired a lot when I worked at the Y. And when you work for a company and you're doing hiring, there's all these steps, all these processes, all these check marks you have to go through to do due diligence. Well, as a business owner, you're the one responsible for that. If you don't have a system in place for hiring, you have to create it, right? And so I will tell you, in the last 6 months since I started my business, only one client has asked for references. That's a big deal. I would definitely say the first thing I would do is ask for references. And I don't necessarily mean the referral. Like most of my clients come through somebody I know. They referred me to them. So there's already some trust there because they're referring. But even then, I would still ask for references of people they've worked with or people that have been their clients, because that is where you can find out really, like, are they good at what they're doing? Yeah.
What does a reference look like?
For a good, great point. One of my clients is a nonprofit, so I was their first hire because everybody there works as a volunteer. Well, they don't work, but they're all volunteers. So I was their first like real hire, and I'm still a contractor, but still, they said, okay, we want to make sure we do this right. Give me 3 references, and they call and they ask questions. And usually you want to ask the same question of all your references. And then after that, after they did those checks, well, actually right before that, I met with the board, and now this is a police foundation. So it was a real interesting meeting because it felt a little bit like an interrogation, but I'm an open book. So I'm like, ask me anything. I'll tell you whatever you want to know. It was pretty fun. I thought it was pretty funny though, because I'm like, wow, it's a bunch of police officers asking me questions. Hilarious, but yeah. Some people might find that very intense.
Where were you on the night of tonight?
It was just, it was very enjoyable for me, but I have a lot of family and like those types of roles, so it didn't scare me at all. I just thought it was kind of funny. But like, if I'm working with a nonprofit, for example, I fully support, hey, I should meet your board if they don't have an on-staff director, or if it's a small business and there's more than one owner, definitely schedule a second meeting to meet all the owners. Like that's important, because when I used to do hiring, I never did the interviews by myself. It's really important that you have a second person at least help vet that person, because they'll notice things I didn't notice.
Right.
And so I did a lot of hiring when I worked at the Y, and I got really good at it at the end, right before I left. So hiring is important, and making sure you just ask questions and then double check those references and make sure that, they are who they say they are. They've got the experience they say they have. Ask for a resume, ask for a bio. A lot of like consultants or contractors will have maybe a bio. Like I have a bio. But I also, for nonprofits, I also share like my background in nonprofit work, because that's very specific work that I do.
Right. So it's an appropriate bio for who, I'm not telling you about, my grandma on the farm, it's business related, right?
Here's like, I share, my relevant experience if it's a nonprofit or versus like a small business. If someone's asking me like, what's your experience? I'm very clear about my experience of what experience I have. And so I think that the more questions you ask, the better, and if you get any funny feeling and any gut response that's not good, trust
intuition.
Right.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about learning how to do that. That's great. So we've been talking about that. So if that's something new to you, like listen to some of our other podcasts. They're bomb about teaching you about listening to your intuition, because your intuition will tell you. Yeah. I think too, as a solopreneur, and I think too, as a single mom, I would take someone with me, or have someone come with me. Like, someone, I'm sure in this networking community that we have, you could find someone to sit with you while you do it, and then to like listen to you and be your sounding board, like of what you liked and didn't like about the person, or if they got anything quirky from them, like it's better, just to have that opinion. Even like going to the doctor, don't go by yourself. All these things, like life is better.
Who has been through the experience of hiring somebody to help you through it. And I think it's okay to tell your new hires, hey, I'm kind of new at hiring people. So, and as a, single business person, right now it's just us or whatever. We want to make sure that we're doing it right. And so we've brought our experienced business partner with us.
Perfect. Yes. And even if it's just a mentor, I mean, they don't even have to be in, they don't have to necessarily be in business, but if you have someone that has done hiring, honestly, if I was in that role, if I was in that situation, I have my dad, because like he was an executive at Boeing forever, and I love his perspective on things. So I would, hey, here's my my family member, but he's got a lot of business experience, so he's just going to join me in this. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I think you could even say that this is my advisor. Like,
advisor.
I mean,
he's like, you're not my dad right now.
This person doesn't get to know that.
Business.
Yes. Right. I will say another piece of due diligence, and this is where I found an interesting couple situations I've experienced with clients. There's no licensure for bookkeeping in our state or any state.
Right.
Being a CPA, there is, right? And that's a whole different ball of wax, and I can explain the difference of the two in a minute. But bookkeepers don't have any required licensing. So how do you then prove that you're qualified? Well, that comes to certifications. So asking for their certifications, what are you certified in? That matters. And for example, I'm certified in QuickBooks Online Advanced, Gusto, payroll services, Intuit, bookkeeping. I mean, all of these certifications I have in addition to some nonprofit stuff. But having certifications is how bookkeepers gain knowledge, and continuing education is part of what we do. So, or should or could be
doing.
And I mean, it's like that a lot for a lot of different types of contractors that you would hire. If you were going to hire a contractor to build you a house, they have certifications.
That's right. And licenses.
They have like business licenses, insurance, all that good stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
You want to make sure.
Okay, I had a question. I will find it. Keep
Okay.
going. Keep
Do you want me
going.
to, do you want me to
Trying to
share the
derail.
difference? Why don't I
Yeah.
share
Oh
the
yeah,
difference?
share the
Let me,
difference.
yeah,
That'd be
let me
great.
share my screen. I've got it. My dog is saying hi. Just a second.
Mine's snoring. It's okay.
So this is a really very short version of the difference between a bookkeeper and accountant. And that's the other thing I found. I picked my business name, Safe Haven Accounting, before I really understood the word accountant can be used in a lot of different ways. But generally, I like to say tax professional versus a bookkeeper, because that
Okay.
is a lot more clear for people. But a bookkeeper is really working with a business owner more often, so at least monthly. Like all my clients I have are monthly, so at minimum I talk to them monthly, but usually more often than that. And then a tax professional, I recommend talking to a tax professional at least quarterly to make sure that your tax strategies accurate and all that. And then usually a lot of tax professionals definitely meet with you at least annually to do your taxes. They can, if you hire an actual accountant that is a CPA, they can also do things that bookkeepers can't do. Like I can't provide you financial statements if you're trying to get a business loan. I provide internal financial statements, but I can't certify them as these are your financial statements because I'm not a CPA. So that's kind of a weird delineation between the two that most people don't understand. So like all my reports I send says for internal use only. Accountants can also, like I said, do tax returns, and usually does a little more analyzing if they're that type of accountant. If they're just a tax professional that just wants to handle your taxes, that's it. There's tax professionals out there for that too. But bookkeepers do more of the day-to-day work in your books. I try to alert people when I see something wrong, which I have seen things wrong, like, hey, did you know that you're still being charged $70 a month for a point of sale service you don't use? That's money that you can save, right?
Right.
You don't want to be paying for something you're not using anymore. So the bookkeeper is just more hands-on, more into the weeds, I'd say, than an accountant. An accountant uses the reports to help you make decisions, but a lot of bookkeepers, and I'll say this for myself, also do some data analysis. My background at the Y the last 4 years was in data analysis when it came to fundraising. So I really love reports. I like helping people understand them. And so that's kind of the main difference between the two. Do you have any questions? Because
No, I mean, this is really clear, and we will share this graphic in the.
So I
description
think we
comments
should
for
read
those
it
that
for our
don't.
audio
Okay.
listeners. Bookkeeper they record financial transactions.
And an accountant prepares adjusting entries.
A bookkeeper posts debits and credits.
And an accountant would work on preparing company financial statements.
The bookkeeper produces invoices, completing payroll.
And the accountant analyzes costs of operations, completing income tax returns.
A bookkeeper maintaining and balancing subsidiaries, general ledgers, and historical accounts.
And an accountant works on aiding the business owner in understanding the impact of financial decisions. Yeah, I think that is a really good rundown, and you could see the differences because they are different, and people assume, oh, they work with money.
It's all the same category because we have that financial money trauma, and we don't want to go any further into that field, right? Like that's a whole world over there that we don't, we don't go into it unless we have to.
And I will say again, the term accountant is used a lot of times interchangeably with a bookkeeper. So I like to say bookkeeper and tax professional. That's how I term it, so people are understanding the difference. But accounting can be part of bookkeeping services. So it's why it gets really confused for people.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. And I think one of the things that I think is hard to do is just like setting your books up for the very, very first time. Because if you can get like a good start, right? Is that something you do in your business?
Yeah. So I'll share a little bit more about what happens when you hire maybe a not great bookkeeper. One service I provide is called a diagnostic review, and I do that for somebody that already has their books in some system, usually QuickBooks Online. And a diagnostic review is where I go through and look at their books and their current state and identify any issues I see. And that the purpose for that is, and I'll tell you this one specific story, somebody wasn't really happy with their current bookkeeper because they weren't communicating. And so she's like, I'm just worried nothing's being done. And I'm like, okay, well, I would recommend a diagnostic review. I'll share with you what I find. It wasn't great. And that's frustrating for me.
So she listened to her intuition and reached out to you.
Yeah.
I'd like to start there. So she had the intuition.
Something
she reached
wasn't right.
out to you. Something doesn't feel right. I'm going to reach out to Chelsey. She can do a diagnostic. So this could be a one-time service, something you do if you're not sure what's going on with, you want another opinion. This is great.
Yes.
Okay, keep going.
Yes, so I did that, and I send a full comprehensive report with a recording of me going over the report so that you understand what you got. And so that's a one-time service, or it can be part of the beginning of hiring me as well. So anyways, I will say from my perspective, it's frustrating to see that kind of thing where you're like, oh, yep, she was right. And I hate having to deliver news like that, but I keep it factual because I never know what that bookkeeper, I don't know. Their systems, their processes might be different than mine. I don't know what their contract says. I don't know what they agreed to. So I can't make judgment calls on that, but I can certainly provide the facts of here's the things I've seen. Here's the audit log. You can make your own determination based off of what you're finding and what I've presented. And then the diagnostic review is just a super helpful tool for those that either don't have a bookkeeper and really need to know what a cleanup might take, or for somebody in this situation where she was not sure things are being done. So it's almost a nice way also to get a second pair of eyes. If you have a bookkeeper, but you don't have a tax professional, having that second pair of eyes can be useful, whether it's another bookkeeper doing a diagnostic review or hiring a tax professional. So they can at least see what's going on and getting those reports, and they can then give you tax advice and tell you how to maybe change things if needed. So I think, honestly, the ideal would have both. You'd have a bookkeeper and a tax professional. So, and I refer, for those that don't have tax professionals, I have a short list that I refer to all the time that are excellent at their job. So, and having a good working relationship between your bookkeeper and tax professional is also very helpful.
Right. If you all speak the same language, it helps.
Yes.
Excellent.
So,
Excellent.
So that's one service. The other service would be like a setup.
What kind of things do you find in a diagnostic? Like,
well, the most recent one, I found reconciliations weren't being done. There was accounts that weren't closed that should have been. The audit log showed she was only in there once every 3 months. Which and again, if they had agreed to monthly bookkeeping, that's very telling to the owner of the business that, oh, but she's not in there every month, right? And so the audit log I don't use as like a punishment. An audit log shows every single thing that's been done. The audit log is something that's in QuickBooks Online. It's extremely useful. A lot of people don't even know it exists, but it's really useful for, like, if I have a client go into their books and accidentally do something that they shouldn't have done, I can see it and fix it. So it's really useful for me.
My data brain goes, that's rad.
And I only, and you can pull it like different ways. So like I just pulled the logins. That's all I pulled. But it's like thousands of pages long. So, anyway, so there's all kinds of things like, what else did I find in her situation? There were just different accounts on her chart of accounts that were not needed. There were duplicate chart of accounts that needed to be fixed and merged. I'll just say this too. I work for Intuit part-time, probably only for a couple more months, and their standards are very specific and strict. And so part of the reason I went to work for them was specifically for that reason, was to learn like really solid standards, because I wanted to apply that in my own business. Most bookkeepers haven't had that like experience unless they've worked for like a bigger firm.
Mhm.
And so when you're making up your own standards as a bookkeeper, and you don't have anything to follow, that's where I see somebody else's work get a little messy, is they
Mhm.
don't necessarily have clear standards, standard operating procedures. And so that's when things aren't consistent or done correctly or things like that. So
Mhm.
when I'm looking at it, I'm looking at it with that perspective in mind of, here are my standards. This is what I would expect to see. And so I try to just keep it to, here's what's missing, or here's what's wrong, or here's something to note that
Mhm.
might need a cleanup.
These
So,
are the things I would do differently.
yes. And
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of subjective stuff with bookkeeping. Like, one person's favorite chart of accounts layout is different than mine, which is
right,
okay, as long as it works for the owner and
right.
you're consistent. Consistency is everything in bookkeeping.
Mhm.
So
Very cool. So we talked about tips in hiring a bookkeeper. We talked about the difference between a bookkeeper and accountant. We talked about what a couple of the services that
oh yes,
you do.
I can just recap that. So diagnostic review,
Yep.
a setup,
Mhm.
could be a one-time or beginning part of the ongoing service. I definitely do historical cleanups where I go back however many years. That's really the expensive part of bookkeeping, is when you have like a year or more to clean up, just because it's a lot of time. And then ongoing bookkeeping as well. And I do monthly for everybody in my clientele right now, but for those that are really new in business, quarterly bookkeeping might be a fit.
Mhm.
So it's less expensive.
Mhm.
But that's a good way to get started if you're so new and you really just don't have the budget for monthly.
I like that. I like that there's so many
And
different
I
options
love
and
that
services.
the idea of, if it's taking you 2 or more hours a week, and if you had a 2 or more hours, you could be doing what you're really passionate about
Mhm.
and making money in your business,
Or
doing the
spending
money
time with your
making.
big rocks.
Right, of spending time with your big
Yes.
rocks, right?
Mhm.
Like, you could take, don't let this be the sand that fills up the space for your big rocks.
Can I
I
share
love
one
it.
more little thing that I did this week?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
I hired a cleaner to come clean my 400 square foot tiny house.
Yes.
And you think 400 square feet, that's nothing, right? Nothing. But every weekend when I'm ready to deep clean it, something else would happen and I didn't do it, right? And so I said to my husband, I'm hiring somebody. It took them 2 people 1 hour and 15 minutes, and it's done. And it was like $150. I'm like, that was such an easy way to spend money. Because then I was literally in my other office working while they were
Right.
in here doing their thing. So I mean, outsourcing matters when it's really about saving you time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways,
That's when it comes in, right? Like
Right.
outsourcing to the
Mhm.
expert so that you can be where
Because
you should
it
be.
builds your own value
Yeah.
yes,
when
right.
you can give some of the things
The
over
things on
here.
your plate away.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. And I
love
think a
that.
cleaner is a great
Mhm.
gift for
Yourself.
because seriously, when we are done building our business,
All
like
day long. we're
all
like,
day
"Oh
long,
my God."
working till 9 or 10 at night, because that's
Yep.
our brains are still going, because they click on as
You guys.
as soon as we start to wind down, all the things come back up, right? Like, we're
Yes.
doing these brain dumps in the middle of the night, like, things
Mhm.
happen, right? So we're always doing things. So like cleaner or someone to prep some meals for you, things like that.
Yeah.
Like those are like valuable expenses to build.
Mhm.
You know, I just had a meeting with the CPA and he was whip smart. I love talking to him because he's just so, I just wanted to like suck his brains out and put them in my brain. Anyways, he was saying, I was asking him like, who do you want me to refer to you? And he said, I want only business owners that have at least one employee. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I've never heard anybody say that. And he guys said, why is that? And he says, because then they understand and are big enough, but also they understand how to outsource work. And he said, and honestly, the best advice I'd ever give to anybody like in the service industry is the first person you should hire is an admin or bookkeeper. Because if you've got your admin and bookkeeping in place, you can hire staff to do the work with you and everything's in place for you on the back end. And I was like, oh, that's a really good idea. Like I never thought of it that way. And he just was an interesting person. So now I refer people to
That's
him.
funny because when you said that, I was like, oh, because restaurants, like you think, oh, I got to get the cook, I got to get a server.
Right.
But if you have no way to pay them, it's hard, right? So that makes sense to me. Like,
and on that point, I also offer payroll services, but even for people that don't necessarily want me to do that, I have a great payroll provider that also can work with people. So
what exactly is payroll services?
So I have most of my clients do their own payroll because they're still small enough that they do their own payroll, and they use a company called Gusto. I love Gusto for the most part. They're excellent to work with. I work for Intuit and I still prefer Gusto over QuickBooks payroll. So just saying, Gusto is amazing. So you can either use Gusto yourself because it's pretty user friendly, and honestly the easiest way for a new business owner to get in, if they don't have a bookkeeper, that is what I would recommend if they're hiring. And then secondly, if I'm already their bookkeeper, like one of my nonprofits, I'm doing their whole payroll for them. So I set them up in the system, I do all the onboarding with Gusto, and then all their staff can clock in and do all the hours, do expense reports within the same platform. It's just really awesome. And then I run their payroll so everybody gets paid. So
awesome.
And then of course I track it in their books too.
I like that. We're going to need that soon.
Gusto. So
I'll send you a Gusto link.
Awesome. Because I'm like, okay, that I know like a couple of people that are like getting ready to hire, or just like they need this, like to know, like, okay, now what do I do? And now does Gusto like help you figure out, like, because I know that when I know enough to be a little dangerous here, that when you start doing payroll, you have to do the payroll taxes. Does it help you with that part, and then like figure out like what your part of that taxes are too as the business owner? Does it help with that part?
Yes, and I'll tell you that I am what's called an after the fact bookkeeper. And what I mean by that is I specifically don't want to know anything about payroll taxes. Not that I don't want to know, I don't want to handle it. Gusto handles all of it, and which is why I prefer to use them. There are I would say old school bookkeepers that are using QuickBooks Desktop, that are running payroll themselves, and they're doing all the calculations and watching for updates on taxes. It is, to me, silly, again, not to outsource that. So Gusto is who I outsource that to, because just tracking, again, I'm not a CPA, so I don't want to have to keep track of all the updates on taxes, including payroll taxes. So Gusto handles all that for you. There are certain things that you have to do when you're ready to hire, like getting workers' comp and all this stuff. But Gusto really, really facilitates that very well. Again, which is why I use them. And I've onboarded, I think 5 clients to Gusto so far. I'm still new in business, so I'm sure that will just continue to grow, but
it will. Absolutely.
Yeah.
they also catch errors if you had a previous payroll provider and switched them. One of my first clients that switched to Gusto, they found a whole bunch of errors, and so they made sure they were compliant and paid their taxes accurately. So that to me was like a big deal. Like, I wouldn't have known that because I'm not a tax professional. And they don't have they have a tax professional, but not looking at the payroll. They're just doing their federal taxes. So it's nice to have Gusto with a whole team of experts doing that work, making sure that everything's up to date.
Oh, that's fabulous.
That is fabulous.
I feel like that just took like the weight off of, I physically sat up more. Wow. I was like, cause that's like that worry, like, am I going to do it right?
Right.
And that's the one, like, I really want to do it right. And we don't want to have to come to you for a diagnostic review and cry.
And get all
Yes. Right. And it's no fun. It's no fun for anybody when, and I'll say this, and I'll try to say this really gently because I don't it's not your fault, right? When you're a new business owner, you just don't know what you don't know. It's not anybody's fault. And so I've had a few people come to me that are brand new in business, and they're like, well, I'm so glad to talk to you. And I'm like, I'm so glad you reached out when you're new versus 5 years down the line. I think I maybe shared this, but I met with someone that hadn't filed taxes for 10 years and needed a 10-year cleanup. And I'm like, well, it's gonna be spendy because I don't charge the same rate I charge monthly. I discount it quite a bit, but that's still 10 years of work.
Yeah.
That, you probably should have been paying somebody for it at some point. So either the person needs to do it themselves and learn how to do it, which is a lot to ask when you're running a business, or you're paying somebody to do it. And so honestly, even new in business, man, I wish in my coaching I would have got a bookkeeper right out of the gate. I would have saved my bacon.
Right.
Yeah.
So you work with people locally, and you're obviously really adept at talking and working on online. So that's really a great service. So you can meet people locally, or you could help solopreneurs all over. So that's really amazing.
And I'll tell you, I'm what's called a cloud-based bookkeeper too. So I do all my work virtual. I don't really meet people in person unless very special circumstances, because time. I mean, seriously, it's just a lot of time to drive and go meet people. So Zoom is my favorite platform. And so I meet a lot of people over Zoom, and on special occasions, I do meet people in person because I like that. But I also have to protect my time a bit too.
Right. Absolutely. Because time is value.
It is.
Yes.
And that's why we're looking at outsourcing a few things, right?
Right.
So
exactly.
Thank you, Chelsey, so much for joining us today and talking with us about making sure that we are protecting ourselves when it comes to our financial well-being, right?
Yeah. And thank you so much. I feel like you just lifted the cloud of all the questions, right? Like that we are building up in our community right now as we're all building our businesses and stepping up into the next level.
We have a lot of people hiring people for the first time and things like that. So I think this is definitely a message that will help many, many people. So again, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me again. This is awesome. I love talking to you both.
And I think we want to take a couple minutes, and we have some upcoming events.
First, we want to always remember that as solopreneurs that we are leading the giving in our communities. So if we're not working for those big corporations that are giving, that we make sure that we are giving to where our hearts are passionate. And I got some puppies on my outfit today. In honor of the Dogs Up podcast this quarter, we've been sponsoring the Boogie Bin. So they take gently used or new articles and deliver them to local rescues via a network of collection donation bins. So they're super cute. So check out their website and their Facebook and their Instagram to see where you can drop off, or just give us a shout and we will be happy to have you meet up and we'll collect donations also.
Yeah. Absolutely. And guys, we have a podcast sponsor.
Woo, woo.
Lorelei Shemaya with MeWe Fairs. We'd like to say thank you so much. MeWe Fairs hosts metaphysics and wellness events online and in person throughout the Pacific Northwest. All of their links are in the comments or in the description. You can find out more at jointhefair.com. Their next in-person events are this weekend, June 11th and 12th in Linwood, and July 16th and 17th in Anacortes.
And they have weekly fairs online. So be sure to check them out if you're at all interested in growing your intuition, learning more about metaphysical healing, or what could that even mean. If you don't know what those words are, but you're curious, this is a great way to find out. They have a great presence online. The website's beautiful. And it really is about wellness and growing and having better lives in a different way. So I really love it. Season 4 is now open and booking. So make sure you go over to to our website at www.womeninleadershipbsmb.com. Check out the empowerment menu and you'll be able to go ahead and get yourself scheduled to get on the podcast.
We'd love to have you guys as guests and continue loving and supporting our women in leadership and business and in our community, both near and far.
We are looking forward to continuing to grow more relationships with more ladies and leaders in business. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Mwah.